Everyone doing? Wonderful. Thank you all for joining me today. On today's Thriving Thursday, we will be discussing how to cope with anxiousness during anxious times. My name is Susanna Sharinian, and I am one of the therapists here at CWFL, Center for Work and Family Life. With that being said, how is everyone doing? You guys can show of hands. Good, bad, so-so. Wonderful. We'll be discussing quite a few tips today on how to get by, dissect, understand anxiousness. Especially during the time of this pandemic, anxiousness has been on the rise, and it is essential for us to gain some good, healthy coping mechanisms on how to kind of handle stressful times. How does that sound? Wonderful. I will go ahead and share my screen in just a moment, and this PowerPoint will be available later today or so. Please feel free to ask questions, type it in the chat, and we can go ahead and get started. Is everyone able to see the screen?
Yes. Yes.
Wonderful. So, coping strategies during anxious times. What is anxiousness? So what anxiousness is the body's natural response to stress. Anxiousness are feelings of fear about the future. Henceforth, that is why it is quite important and vital for us to recognize where our anxiousness stems from. With that being said, it is important to kind of ask yourself a few questions. The questions may include, who is this anxiousness triggered by? Myself or others? What is it triggered by? When am I most anxious is one of the most important questions to ask yourself. You may come to realize it may be a lot more during the day, at night when you have some time to debrief and think about some things that happened during the day. Why am I feeling anxious is another important question to ask yourself. Is it work? Is it personal? Is it family? So you want to dissect. You want to give yourself the opportunity to explore a few platforms to kind of understand where your anxiousness is arising from. Lastly, and the most important step of understanding anxiousness is by asking yourself how you can control your anxiousness. What are some really good coping mechanisms you can kind of turn to and utilize when things get a little bit rough? As mentioned earlier during this Thriving Thursday meeting, right now is the time where people feel most anxious. So hopefully the tools I will be providing and the guidelines I will be providing will be more helpful than not. So with that being said, we can kind of go ahead and move on to our next slide. So coping strategies during anxious times is just a few steps away. So with that being said, consider a simple practice when you feel as though you are starting to feel anxious by practicing some of these steps. The first slide will have the first 5, and then the second slide will have 6 through 10. We will kind of go over one bullet at a time, and then we will kind of debrief on it and understand what these steps may mean to certain people. First and foremost, let's start off when feeling anxious, when you feel as though you need some time to yourself to understand what it is that you are feeling and going through. I highly suggest taking a time out. Now, that probably sounds very simple in theory, but that is one of the harder things to do. To kind of stop yourself and say, this is the time I need to sit down and understand what is going on. Stop what you are doing, whether that is, working from home, close that laptop. If it is that personal issue, let it sit to the side for just a split second and take a deep breath. It's as simple as that. That's the first step of coming to cope with anxiousness. Taking that time for yourself to take a deep breath by putting your problems, hurdles, obstacles to the side. Secondly, accept that you cannot control everything. Now, this pandemic is a prime example. This is out of our control. What we can control is our behavior, our coping mechanisms, and the way we react to our issues. So it's rather better to be proactive than reactive when some things are not in our control. The third step is, as you might have heard, to stay active and exercise. Moving is a great way to reduce stress as it releases the pleasure hormone of dopamine and it burns off excessive energy. Dopamine is a great way for you to feel pleasure symptoms, such as decreasing your anxiety, your anxiousness, some of those unwanted triggered stressors. Moving on to step 4, create sources for positive support and thinking. Now, that doesn't necessarily have a concrete definition, and as it states, create your own. Find what works best for you as an individual. Some of the ones I have listed on here are identify areas you want to alter. For instance, recognizing some things you may be feeling and acknowledging, this may be good for me to kind of understand, dissect, and alter for myself. Whether that is, once again, personally, professionally, or some gains, some opportunities you want to gain in the process of altering your behaviors. Practice positive self-talk. So every night, give yourself a pat on the back for getting through another hard day, for getting through another beautiful day, and kind of be your motivating factor. Don't be afraid to tell yourself what a wonderful job you did that day. That is one way to start practicing positive self-talk. Tune in with your emotions. For instance, meet yourself where you are at. If you feel as though you need some time for yourself, give yourself the right to take that some time for yourself. If you feel as though you are at a really good place, try to remain in that good place and don't be afraid to acknowledge how you are feeling. Also, practicing positive social interactions. Now, once again, given the current circumstances, it may be a little bit difficult to do that, but do it best to your knowledge, best to your capabilities. Have Zoom parties, dance by yourself, do some things that will kind of get you motivated to do some social interaction, but also practicing the safe guidelines. Build up resilience. This is one of the best things you can do for yourself. And how will you build that? By practicing, by giving yourself on the patting yourself on the back, by giving yourself that positive self-talk, by practicing what it is that will be beneficial for you. Once again, feeding that dopamine pleasure sensation. Moving on to number 5, focus on your breathing. So I have listed a breathing method here that you may want to practice. Breathing, of course, is one of the essential ways to decrease anxiety and anxiousness. So this is most definitely one of the best practice methods you can utilize when things get rough, when you start feeling a little bit anxious, and you feel as though you can benefit from a form of breathing exercise. Now, with that being said, we will be moving on to our last slide, which is 6 through 10. Number 6, distract your anxiousness by. Now, picking a category and naming all the things you can. For example, dog breeds. I mean, who doesn't love dogs, right? Or cooking spices, cars, anything you feel that is important to you, anything you have an idea about. So name that category and start picking names, start picking colors. So utilize your do's to kind of distract yourself from that anxious feeling you may be feeling. Additionally, you can practice counting backwards by 3 from 100. That is another good way to kind of distract your mind from that anxious feeling. Number 7, journal emotions and thoughts. Have you guys ever heard of the 5 W's and 1 H? So if you haven't, this is a really good way to kind of break down your emotions. Once again, going back to the first slide, which I will refer to in a little bit, asking yourself who, what, when, where, why, and how with any circumstance, and just jotting down bullet points. You don't have to write a big essay, nothing of that form. It can be very general and straight to the point. What am I feeling? How am I feeling it? Why am I feeling it? And when am I feeling it? And what are some good ways to overcome these feelings? These are some of the practices you may want to start practicing in case you do start feeling a little bit anxious. But overall, journaling is one of the best ways to kind of understand what you are feeling, because sometimes feelings come out best when you write. It is studied. It has, this is based on Mayo Clinic, so it is very science and research based. Journaling is the way to go. Number 8, structure time for reading, rest, and opportunities. If you don't like reading, that's perfectly fine. Set some goals for yourself, even if they're minor goals, such as today I want to have a 5-minute walk around the block. Accomplish that goal. And don't be afraid to voice that you accomplished the goal you set for yourself. That is one of the best ways you can kind of distract your anxiousness. That is one of the best ways you can kind of feed your rewarding sensations. Number 9 is practice grounding exercises. The 5 senses is a really good exercise to practice. It's the 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can touch, 2 things you can smell. This is one, and then 1 thing you can taste. This is actually one of the best grounding exercises to practice, because it can be practiced in your car, at home, at work. It's one of those things that can kind of work out anywhere and everywhere. And then lastly, talk to someone. Come talk to me. Come talk to one of the other therapists here at CWFL. Find a trusting family member you can kind of turn to who's willing to hear you out, provide you some healthy grounding exercises, healthy coping mechanisms. Find a friend that you feel comfortable sharing your emotions with and who's also consistent. You want to have that support system, but you also want them to be a little bit more consistent. And you can reach out to them when things get a little bit rough. But if you can't find a trusting family member or a friend you want to share your feelings with, we are here to be part of your support system, part of your guidance, and we are here to go through the journey you want to accomplish, go through the journey you want to overcome. With that being said, that kind of concludes today's Thriving Thursday, but I'm going to go ahead and take some questions.
Of course it. Uh-oh.
Okay, let's see. Yes, most definitely. Someone asked if you guys will be able to receive this PowerPoint. Most definitely. That will be one of the things we can do for you guys. We can go ahead and send over the PowerPoint. It will be posted. You can feel free to kind of unmute yourself, ask questions, or you can also
Hi, I had a quick question. Do you have any recommendations for morning anxiety? I sometimes find that I only experience it right when waking up and then can kind of go back to normal, but I would just rather not experience it at all. I was wondering if you have any tips for that.
Her.
You're on mute.
You're on mute.
I'm sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm sorry about that. Thank you for the question. I did hear you. With that being said, trying out any of the 10 tips will be the way to kind of start. Try out each one every day and see what works best for you. There's really no right or wrong when it comes to therapy and finding the right coping mechanisms, but this is a start. You can go ahead and start off with any one of the 10. But I highly suggest you start off with affirmations. When you first wake up, give yourself that minute after your alarm rings to kind of take a deep breath and, state 3 things you are grateful for, 3 things you are looking forward to. So start your day on a positive note, and that tends to release a lot of anxiousness, a lot of trigger-provoking thought processes. That kind of answer your question? Wonderful.